I want to now introduce Jerry Frantz. This is the first time, by the way, at a Center for Free Enterprise program that anyone that we've trusted the microphone to anyone but David Brown or myself. And we're going to do that. We're being very risk-seeking this month with Jerry. I reached out to Ray Leach at JumpStart when Ted agreed to speak. And I asked Ray if someone from JumpStart might want to introduce Ted. And Ray suggested Jerry would be good. Jerry is the Chief Investing and Services Officer at JumpStart. His career began in New York City advertising agency, J. Walter Thompson, where he worked in account management, followed by 5 years in brand management with Bristol Myers Squibb. He then served as marketing director for Radio City Music Hall Productions, where he helped lead Radio City to record revenue and attendance levels. Jerry then returned to his hometown of Cleveland, where he worked with my good friend Bob Gerke at Bristol Myers Squibb as a marketing executive with Matrix Essentials, later acquired by L'Oreal, where he managed a $200 million hair care division and created the new product development and promotional marketing departments. And as I mentioned, Jerry holds an MBA from Columbia, and more importantly, a BA in economics and psychology, figure that out, from the University of Michigan. Welcome, Jerry, and then Jerry will introduce Ted. Come on up, gentlemen. Let's have a round of applause.
Thank you so much for the introduction and the opportunity to moderate our guest speaker today, Ted Frank. I've had the pleasure of meeting Ted about, 12 years ago?
It's been a while.
And Ted was pursuing an opportunity to join the team at JumpStart, and he was already a serially successful entrepreneur at the time, so it was a really good fit. If you're not familiar with what JumpStart does, we provide advisory services and capital to startup businesses. And as we were talking about him joining the team, the only problem was Ted said, I think I can only give you 10 months. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, I got a lot of ideas, I got some projects. And I said, well, why don't we just, great, ambitious guy, so why don't you join the team and see how it goes? And ended up being a 3.5-year run, and a very important and valuable member of the team. One of the things that I dubbed with Ted is I refer to him as the Velvet Hammer, because he has this incredible style of being insightful in business, brutally honest and direct, yet really approachable. And I would watch him sit across the table from entrepreneurs and say, I looked at your pitch deck and I really don't understand how you could ever get to these kind of financial projections. Your product market fit really isn't well substantiated. It's really not very well organized, so I think we got to start over. And the entrepreneur would say, thank you. And I was like, wow, if you can call the baby ugly and get a thank you, you got skills. So I sort of jumped in the middle of the story, so I think what we'll do today, just to give a better sense of Ted and how he became the entrepreneur that he is today, we'll get into CoverMyMeds, but why don't we rewind the tape and start at the beginning, and where you're from, and as a kid, any idea when you were just getting started that you would end up doing the kind of stuff you do?
No, not. Is this on? Can you guys?
No highest margin lemonade stand or anything like that?
Well, I did have a lawn mowing business, if we want to go way back, which it was an incredible profit margin until my dad one day said, "Where the hell's all of our gas going?" I said, "Well, Dad, I'm cutting eight lawns here. I mean, what do you expect?" And he looked at me and he said, "Okay, son, no more of that. If this is your business, you're going to pay for gas." I said, "Yeah, but you're going to cut into my profit margins." So that was my first entrepreneurial venture. But honestly, I thought I'd be an engineer just like my dad. I grew up in Cincinnati, and that was my path. I thought that's what I knew. Didn't really have exposure to any entrepreneurs or any field other than engineering. But unfortunately, my father passed away when I was 15, and that opened up a lot of other people that stepped into my life. And one that I spent more time with was my step-grandfather, who was one of the very first formal venture capitalists in the country in New York. And that gave me my first exposure and interest in finance and, to a certain extent, entrepreneurship.
So you had some DNA in there and some good experience, but you ended up going Miami, is that right?
Yes, Miami of Ohio.
And
yep.
So taking that sort of little bit of entrepreneurial background, but you ended up in banking, so connect those dots.
Well, I guess I should maybe take one little step back. And when I was in high school and my father passed away, one of the things that happened is he had worked for the same exact company for 32 years. And when he died, he was 1 year away from his pension. Anybody want to guess how much my mother got? 0. So that obviously impacted our family and impacted my perspective. And I look back, and at that time, that's when it was much less about, I still like to play golf, but much less about golf and baseball and friends, and much more about making sure that I was going to be successful. So I committed then to just leave it all in the field. That was what I wanted. So I went to Miami, wanted to learn finance, felt like the right thing if I ultimately wanted to be an entrepreneur. But Miami had an incredible program going into the banking industry. And my options were, to go into a money center bank or maybe a regional bank like Ameritrust. And it felt like the right thing to do because it would give me visibility across a broad range of companies. Plus, I wanted to make money, so that was a good way to start.
Is that what got you to Cleveland?
Well, that and my partner, who helps me keep it real, which is very true, and suffered through all the years of being an entrepreneur with me. But it was really family and the opportunity. Ameritrust, actually, it's interesting. It presented a great opportunity because it was a smaller bank. I could choose to be one of 20 in a training class, or I love JP Morgan, I love the others, but the training class there is in the hundreds. So it felt like there was a more of an opportunity for flexibility and advancement at Ameritrust.
So transition from banking to startup, what motivated and prompted that?
I don't know how the hell that happened. Actually, I got my MBA at Case at night while a banker, and had some great experiences and not so great experiences in banking. But generally, got to work with some incredible people. But one of the interesting things that happened in my MBA is I took a family business course. There was a professor, former dean of the business school there, Ted Alfred, has since passed away. And he had that course with Ernesto Poza, who is one of the top family business consultants in the country, really in Central and South America, no longer in Cleveland. But one day, Ted Alfred came up to me and said, "Hey, Ted, you really need to be an entrepreneur." And at that point, I'd been a banker for 6.5 years. And I'm thinking, why? Like, what makes you think that I would be good at that? I've never managed anybody. But he said, no, you just need to do it. And so he was the catalyst. He introduced me to Bruce Harris, who owned Confron, was at the time the largest convention planning firm in the country, who was starting a software company. And we met for a weekend.
Did he ever elaborate as to what, it's obvious now looking at your path to re-engineer why, but at the time, did he ever say what it was?
I was pretty engaged in the class, and maybe I was a little intense versus perhaps the most of the students. I just think he knew that I was interested in markets and the organizational dynamics and building. As I think back, maybe that's what he saw.
So we'll get to how things worked out at CoverMyMeds, but you probably brought a lot of experiences and learning along the way. And was it right after, because your first startup was Plantsoft?
Yes.
In the 90s.
Yes.
Was that right out of B school?
Well, that was, yeah. I spent the 7 years in banking and got my MBA, and then shortly thereafter became an entrepreneur. Really what I brought into CoverMyMeds was a lot of learnings and a lot of mistakes. I often say that I'd like to go back maybe 25 years and have a redo with what I know now, but maybe that's not practical.
A few highlights. So looking back at Plantsoft, what was it, and what'd you learn? What would you do differently back then?
Well, it's interesting. Plantsoft was Bruce Harris owned the largest convention planning firm. So believe it or not, he booked more group guest rooms out of Twinsburg, Ohio, than any other company or location on the planet. And no one knew. Some people knew, I suppose. But he wanted to improve the process of meeting and convention planning. These are multi-million-dollar meetings and a lot of complexity, a lot of details you have to worry about. And it was all done by fax and FedEx. So he was on a mission. He was going to build software to improve that process. Started that software company. I'd say if I look back, that business, we had incredible people. I mean, these were dedicated, hardworking, smart people. The thing that made that difficult was, it was in 1995. We had to decide between CompuServe and doing this internet thing. Thank God we chose the internet. But we would walk around and talk to people and talk about the internet, and especially in Cleveland, they thought we had 3 heads. So no, we're never going to use software like that on the internet. But what the learnings from that, if I really think hard about it, we didn't really do enough work to determine product market fit. We built a product for the top firm in the country that did meeting planning. Everybody else, or at least most of the other people that were in the convention planning business, didn't want to touch a computer. They could care less, right? They're people. They want to plan meetings. So I think the biggest challenge there was product market fit. And we ultimately adapted it and merged it into some other companies. So it did succeed, but it was a struggle.
Did that ride through the dot bomb, or did you had already gotten
We had already gotten out at that point. Yeah.
So the next census was followed, and just any string through that just to create a thread before we start getting into the CoverMyMeds stuff.
Well, you know, the software industry in Cleveland, or at least the internet-based software industry in Cleveland, wasn't huge at that point. So you know, you get to know the folks that are in it. But one day I got a phone call from, at the time it was Chase Capital Partners, and they were wanting to. I mean, you talk about the dot bomb. Well, this was the dot bubble. You remember that literally the absolute peak of the bubble? That's when I jumped into, it was called Compliant, and we were building a software division. And it was so nuts that I was in the interview process with one of the venture firms back in the company, and they said, well, how much money do you want? And I said, well, are you talking about me, or are you talking about the company? And he said, well, we're talking about the company. I said, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't really love the idea that you guys came up with. I think it could do this in a little different way. And they said, no, just give us a number. So I threw out a number, I think $7 or $8 million. So, okay, no problem. I'm like, wait, does anybody want a business plan? So it was a little nuts. I mean, that was the
long gone.
Yeah, those days are long gone. Well, in some places. But it was an interesting thing. I call that it's kind of the California style Hail Mary, we're going to go for broke. Very, very interesting, approach to building a business. I don't necessarily love to do that. I learned a lot in how to deal with that, where when you've got a venture firm coming to you and saying you're not spending enough money, we were burning $2 million a month. And this is a long time ago, so $2 million back then was worth a lot more today. So it was an interesting experience, really thinking about how are you going to market, having focus. At the time, we did something very broad. We were trying to, ultimately, it went through iterations, or at least adaptation. We were trying to build a software application to manage enterprise-wide governance, risk, and compliance. And that's a very broad category, very broad problem. And we were spreading our resources too thin. We were trying to do too much. So that meant we were burning a lot of money. But the vision was you're going to get to $1 billion valuation in 2 or 3 years. So ultimately we had a good team. We learned a lot, and we sold that to Wolters Kluwer in 2007. But an interesting ride.
So obviously to me, because I was with you at the time, you got to know CoverMyMeds when they came through the JumpStart process. When you left, you were launching or getting back into MarketCypher, so maybe you tell the group a little plug for what MarketCypher is, and you did a couple things before actually landing back in and reconnecting with CoverMyMeds. So talk a little about what MarketCypher is and how you ended up getting on the team at CoverMyMeds.
Yeah, well, MarketCypher has just been my consulting company over the years. I had a dream, or at least I had a desire to be an idea guy, to start companies, to come up with the idea. And so the vision back then was, okay, I'm gonna come up with something and we're gonna build it from scratch. What I've since learned is I'm not really the idea guy. Like, maybe I have some good ideas, but really what I can do is I know how to identify good ideas and good people, and I can help them be successful. So at the time, I was thinking about building something. I had joined the board as executive chairman of a company called SamePage or ExpenseWire in Worcester, of all places, back in, I don't know, must have been early 2006. And they were building expense management software, and some friends had invested in the business and asked if I would come in and help them. And so I jumped in there, and that was really the first time I was able to bring a level of clarity on what it takes to build a business. And you know, as an entrepreneur, I don't know, I'm honored to actually be speaking with a group like this. You all have been so successful. But you know, one of the challenges of being an entrepreneur is sometimes you can be a little starry-eyed. No problem is too big to tackle. And I think, at least for me, the epiphany was when I realized, okay, that's great, and I'm happy to be aggressive and pursue, but we also need to be focused and practical, and I can't burn out everybody around me to be successful. So it was an interesting experience there. But MarketCypher, that vision originally was to start building companies from scratch.
And then you originally engaged with CoverMyMeds as a board member.
Well, yes. So join JumpStart. You know, the JumpStart thing, I don't want to gloss over that. I'd raised a lot of money. I'd done a lot as an entrepreneur and as an executive of entrepreneurial companies, but I'd never been on the investing side. I'd done the banking side, but never on the equity investing side. And so the idea of getting that experience was incredibly attractive. And I will say that I don't think I could have been as successful at CoverMyMeds as I was had I not had the experience at JumpStart. So joining JumpStart as a venture partner gave me, an ability to identify or to build the pattern recognition on what works, what doesn't work, what are the markets, what's the product market fit, what are the attributes of successful leaders and managers. So at JumpStart, as a venture partner, we had a lot of deals coming in, and CoverMyMeds was one of those very, very, very early deals that came through. And we looked at it. I mean, I remember we had these conversations about CoverMyMeds and thought, what? What's this prior authorization thing? How could that possibly be a market? And so that's how we met them. When they came through, that's how I met them, and served as an advisor, because back then, I don't know if it's changed, but we couldn't actually be board members, which was kind of annoying.
You could be board members, but anyway.
Yeah, so anyway, so we...
As a nonprofit, we have a very specific conflict of interest policy, but I digress.
Yeah, right, I know, it's a pain. But anyway, so I was an advisor to them, and we can talk a lot about, I don't know how much time we have, but got a lot to say about CoverMyMeds.
Well, why don't you start with those? I mean, yes, you knew the deal. We all knew the deal, and I've gone back and reread those investment memos just because. And yes, you see a lot of good things, and there was a lot of positive things. Companies, at least in my view, and see how you feel, they don't just jump out and go, wow, this is going to be a unicorn. You see potential, and then things start going down a trajectory, and then you jumped in and on that trajectory. Why don't you talk about those elements? What was it, and seeing it starting to happen, and what were the dynamics that started to set this one apart?
So I guess if I look back on my career and my experiences in business, it's all about the people, right? I mean, probably everybody in this room recognizes that if you work with phenomenal people that are dedicated, smart, you're gonna find a way, or at least you have a higher probability of finding a way to be successful. So the first thing that really jumped out to me with the team was, Alan Scantlin. Just the guy's a rock star, and in a very different style than me. Really different style. I mean, that guy, he is brilliant, and he's an incredible active listener. Versus me, where I'm out there and I'm doing a lot of talking. So really complementary skills. Matt Scantlin, these are the three founders. Matt Scantlin, just again, one of the smartest people I know. Very thoughtful, very technically adept. I mean, he's built software companies. He's done a lot of this, and an incredible leader. So him, and then Sam Rajan, who the guy's a force of nature. super connected and able to take a product to market and build the relationships necessary to be successful. So first thing that stood out, bar none, was the people, was the team. And what's interesting there too is that they were very clear about having a flat organizational structure and being committed to the team. So the culture of CoverMyMeds, you could taste it, even in those early days when we had a handful of people. So the commitment to the people, the team, the people that they brought to the table, I mean, it's kind of remarkable. There are a lot of people that came to that company and accepted, frankly, very low salaries versus what they could make elsewhere because they wanted to be part of building something incredible. So we had an executive from the payer business that, the guy's a rock star and built out the payer business. We had a guy that ran the pharmacy business who knows everybody, extraordinarily experienced, incredibly good. So I could go through and just pick out a group of people that, just incredible.
So earlier you said if you could go back and redo some of the other startups, product market fit and understanding some of that is some of the miss.
Yeah.
What was it about this one that nailed it?
Well, it's part of this is really understanding the dynamics in the industry. So you need to be a real systems thinker to look at the healthcare business the way we did, or the way they did when they came up with the idea. Many people had tried to solve the problem. I don't know if everybody knows what the prior authorization process is, but I'll hit it real quick because it's an important point. Way back, say 10, 15 years ago, there were a lot of generics coming onto the marketplace, a lot of generic drugs. And the PBMs, the prescription benefit management companies and the insurance companies, wanted, if you could get the same exact molecule or same exact drug for $10 versus $100 on the brand name, of course you want people to go to the $10 drug. It makes all the sense in the world. So what they would do is they would put a note on there that says, unless there's a darn good reason why you're going to prescribe and get this $100 drug, we're going to not approve it. You need to go to the $10 drug. So that was the first part of when prior authorizations first got introduced. Then there's some other things. Hey, look, let's have what's called a step therapy, and you start, try to use penicillin, and if that doesn't kill it, then move to this, and then move to that, and then move to that, because you're going to get progressively more expensive. So, when we spent time with the CoverMyMeds team in the early days, they were able to articulate so clearly what the problem was that it helped me understand, wow, this is huge, right? This is a giant problem. It's not sustainable. It's way too difficult for too many of the participants, the pharmacies and the doctors. And there were pain points in this overall network. And the network is the next really important point. That network, you had to have everybody participate. You had to have everybody participate or else it would break. If we couldn't get things to the plans, if a doctor had to go to dozens of different systems to submit a prior authorization as opposed to one, how are you going to be successful? So, they were able to talk about each individual participant in that marketplace and help us understand how you were gonna be successful. And then the last piece, which is, since other people had tried to solve the problem, other people had tried to build systems to make this prior authorization process more efficient, but they'd never figured out the economics. They'd try to charge the doctors or the hospitals, and they'd say, wait a minute, I didn't create this problem. Why are we spending money to fix this problem? Or they'd go to the PBMs, and the PBMs, they didn't really want to solve the problem with a startup or with a network, right? Because it's like any business, everybody thinks their business is unique, and that may be true in many ways, but not always. Well, same thing in the PBM or in the prescription benefit management space, where everybody thinks their formulary and the way they manage it is unique, so they didn't want or didn't believe that consistency would be of benefit. So anyway, probably too long of an answer to your question, but really understanding that, they were able to say, you know what, who benefits really and who'd be willing to spend money on this problem? It's the pharmaceutical companies, because they're spending billions of dollars to get these drugs into the marketplace. And the prior authorization process, like you get the ball all the way down the field to the 1 yard line, and a huge percentage of those are getting blocked. So if I came to you and I said, look, you pay me $1 and statistically I'll show you that you're going to get 10 back, are you going to commit to that? Of course. I mean, I'd take that deal every day. So they were able to really think through that market, and they brought a level of maturity, a level of experience, a level of industry knowledge to the table that when I started peeling back that onion, like, oh my God, we got to invest in this company.
So you've got smart team, clearly defined problem solution, product market fit. Talk about, now you're trying to, you have multiple touch point stakeholders. You got to get some critical mass going. How do you get over the executional risk of creating something that's a platform with adoption when there's so many trade winds that are working against you?
Yeah, boy, there's a lot to that. Let's unpack that a little bit. So I will say, let me again backtrack just a little bit. One thing that I want to make sure that everybody understands is that the other thing that CoverMyMeds had was a mission. This is clearly a mission-driven company. Every single presentation we would make started with how many patients we had helped. The mission of the company was to help patients get the medication they need to lead healthy lives. And that provided a North Star to the company that would help us navigate all kinds of challenges, all kinds of opportunities. We were only going to win if we could bring an incredibly enthusiastic team together throughout the entire company. I mean, when people joined, they were joining something that they fundamentally believed in, because this is excruciatingly difficult work, as we all know, to build a company. I mean, the hours and the effort that's required are extraordinary. But so to your point, in building the company, we had, there's always challenges, and these things change over time. I like to call them the inflection points in building a company. Your problems are a certain set of problems up until you get to a certain stage in market penetration and adoption and size, and then all of a sudden things change, right? All of a sudden you're like Sam. Sam was one of the most prodigious sales leaders I've ever seen, but he was the closer, man. When he came in, it just remarkable. When we needed something to happen, you put Sam out there and it would happen. But at a certain point, Sam's capacity is tapped out, and you need to get to a professional sales organization. So anyway, the point is that there's a variety of inflection points. So we focused on a few things that really mattered. One was, in order to scale and take advantage of this opportunity, one was culture. And I learned a lot from Alan and Matt and Sam about what that really means. So we had a culture where we were incredibly committed to involving people. Someone mentioned the 10-year planning process. Everybody was involved in this business. Everybody was treated like an owner. Everybody acted like an owner, at least maybe I'm being overly dramatic, but most people acted that way. So culture received way more attention than if it was just me, then I would have applied to that topic. But it really helped. It helped us, most importantly, attract incredible people. We always committed, we were going to be one of the highest payers in the market, compensation-wise. We were going to give people more opportunity to advance than they would get elsewhere. And even today, the percentage of employees that advance through the organization every year is remarkable. A lot of internal promotions. But you do that by giving people a responsibility and trust and letting them engage in building the business. So culture, the concept of talent was always something very, very, very important.
How much in setting that culture was setting expectations when hiring?
Well, yeah.
intense is probably, well, this is an intense experience and paying well, but you're trying to ride this rocket ship. It's not going to be 9 to 5. So
Right.
how do you tap into, is there a big front end of the culture? Is it about the people and getting them indoctrinated to, this is what you're signing up for, so be clear?
Yeah, no, great point. I'm glad you brought it up. Yes. So the intensity of the interview process at CoverMyMeds from the very, very beginning was pretty high. So we would, of course, source all kinds of people, a lot of network effect there where, we actually wanted our employees to refer people that they know and trust because you're bringing them into the family. You're going to rely on those people. So who better to get than somebody that believes this other person is going to be successful? But the process would be, and this was applied, it was actually Matt did this at his technology consulting company and then applied it to the technology team at CoverMyMeds, and then we applied it to literally every position at CoverMyMeds. So you would source a bunch of folks, they would go through that initial screening, they would ultimately interview with the team that they'd be working with, and then maybe they'd get to me or whoever the manager is of that area and work their way through the organization. But we would do personality testing. Like I wouldn't interview somebody unless I literally we used a tool called Personalysis, which really helps with identifying personality profile and attributes of their character. So unless I had that, I wouldn't sit down and interview somebody because that helped inform the kinds of questions that I would ask and the direction that I would go, the factors that I would emphasize. If it was clear that somebody wanted a 9 to 5 job, they probably wouldn't get to this stage. But there were certain attributes where you're like, yeah, that doesn't really smell right. So you would dig in there, and it was really effective. But then, so once, let's say that it was one of my team, if they get to the point where, that this person has potential, they would do something called a project day, which is incredible. So what we would do is we give people, each job would have a particular project defined. If it was a development job, it's development, it's coding. Maybe they'd get a product that's intentionally screwed up in some way and they'd have to fix it. If it's finance, we would give them maybe a market analysis or some financial statements depending upon the job, or if it's an accounting job, be it something accounting where the things didn't balance and we'd want them to fix it. And they wouldn't get this in advance, but they would literally have to block at least a half an hour a day, or a half of a day, and they would come in to a room and solve the problem, develop a PowerPoint presentation or some kind of a presentation, and present it to the team that they would be working with. So, I think it gave people an indication of the kind of intensity that they would be walking into. But that process really helped us vet and secure incredible people.
I know because through some of your former coworkers and our mutual friends, I've heard stories about, again, how the directness and the honesty when you were hiring people, like, this is what's expected, this is what you got to do, and if this doesn't work out, it's not going to work out. But that directness and setting up the expectations is so critical. So you're assembling this team, you've got the culture, you've got great leadership and all that stuff. So it's really easy, right? You just kind of ride this thing.
I just took the rest of the time off.
It just cranks, right? So along the way, there had to be ups and downs, and there's probably some that you probably can't share. But what is the context? Because from the outside, you just see hit the number, hit the number, hit the number, hit the number. But from the inside, it can't possibly be like that.
Well, no, yeah. So there's always challenges. You're going to have the typical challenges, the people challenges, right? We were also super clear, for example, that with the way this company is growing, there's a very good chance, for example, on the HR side, that I'm going to have to hire someone above somebody that's in a role, right? So if the clarity with which we bring people into the company, if I don't say that, I'm doing a disservice to our company and I'm doing a disservice to the person, because they're going to be unhappy. Even if they don't say it, they're going to be unhappy with that. So those were inevitable challenges. But probably we had a few things that absolutely needed to happen. It was very clear that this was a very, very, very large market opportunity. And given the network nature of the solution, one company was going to win, because it was clear the doctors aren't going to, they don't want to have 2 or 3 or 4 different apps and have to figure out, oh, Jerry's on this set of insurance companies and Justin's on this other set, or Mary is on this other set, so figuring out which app to go to. So we knew this was a race, like a serious race, that if we didn't accelerate very, very, very quickly and lock down that market, somebody else would, or it would fragment and never reach its full potential. So speed and revenue growth became something that drove everyday thinking, all of our strategic planning, because it was just an imperative. And that informs a lot of what you do in building out the company, the resources that you have and such. The second thing that we knew was that we had to protect, we needed to understand and protect to the death our profit model, our profit margins. Because it would be very, very, very easy in that circumstance where you believe you've got to acquire this market quickly to start winning by price. So that was always that's the thing that I would beat on and beat on and beat on and beat on. Or the sales team, they would have a quota, individual quota of $5 million every year. And what are they going to say the next year? We're reaching market saturation. We can't possibly, because I would actually increase their quota because the market's growing. So, oh my God, $7 million? I knew I shouldn't have tried to hit my number last year. But those were the kind of conversations that we would have. But that profit model, it was really interesting because our customers, so take the average pharmaceutical company. So we benefited by having a huge number of prior authorizations that were happening. We committed to do every plan, every drug for a prior authorization, regardless of whether they were customers. So if we had, eventually we automated the process with the payers. Originally it was all faxes. We started out sending tens of thousands of faxes, and ultimately it's millions of faxes that are getting sent to these plans because they couldn't accept things electronically, which is why they then committed to doing it electronically, because it became unsustainable. But so we really had to focus on defining the market opportunity. So the TAM, I called it the NAM, the near-term accessible market. Just because it's a $3, $4, $5 billion market doesn't mean you can access all of it today, because you may not have the channel partners. But we would figure out how much you could access. And that was really, really, really important, because if people didn't believe, if they didn't have the clarity on the opportunity, they just thought we were beating them up, right? They needed to understand that it really is a growing market, that there's more prior authorizations coming in.
So all these, this is helpful, these are all the dynamics of growth, but to the extent that you can share, what's a really bad day feel and look like, and why? Because again, it can't be all like unicorns and rainbows.
Yeah. Well, so take, for example,
does it come from channel pressures? Does it come from your partners? Does it come from too much growth is scary because you just don't know if you can deliver?
Yes,
Do you worry about
yes. So, gotta think about what I can say. But yes, so let's take channels as an example. There are, everybody, all of these participants have different motivations, right? So in theory, everybody's committed to helping patients get the medication they need to lead healthy lives. On the other hand, somebody's bonus may not be based on that metric. Their bonus is based on converting more of these people off of the expensive medications, or slowing prescription momentum in certain categories, or maybe we ultimately became one of the biggest marketing expense for some pharma companies, period, to get these drugs into the hands of patients that
So they're
desperately needed
budgeting
them.
a certain amount, the adoption goes through the roof, and they're seeing big bills and calling you up.
Right, because then, this is a real live problem, and we spent a ton of money and solved it in different ways. But yeah, so because we were growing so quickly, and it was transaction-based pricing for the most part, they'd see their bill go from $5 million last year to $10 million this year, and they'd see a path to $20 million the next year. And you can imagine the conversations you're having at that point.
Discounts.
Volume discounts, right, which impacts our profit model. So interestingly, we spent a fortune. We had almost a 1-to-1, if not greater, ratio of analysts to our sales team. So we literally had data analysts, now everybody wants to be called a data scientist, but a data analyst and just people that understood how to articulate to our customers and how to track and present the return on investment. Because we would have these conversations. In the early days, we had massive concentration with 1 or 2 pharmaceutical companies. And they're seeing their bills go up. So we got those phone
So
calls.
they're not thinking ROI, they're thinking expense. Right?
Well, right, because their bonus is based on their marketing budget. They may spend something, our ROI, or return on investment, for these pharma companies was remarkably quick, but there still was a lag, right? So you could be in the 4th quarter of their budget year, and they're going to come back and say, I'm done. We're stop the program for the rest of the year because I'm over budget. And if we didn't have the ability and the access to a lot of the executives in these pharma companies, that could have stopped us dead in our tracks, right? Yeah. So we really, these are the kind of problems where you're like, holy cow, our number one customer represents 50% of our revenue, just came to us and said, I'm done through the end of the year and I need a discount. So of course now, if you weren't prepared, all of your resources are then dedicated to trying to save a client instead of growing.
So you got all these dynamics going. We got a lot of financial transaction people in the audience here. Within what you can share, talk about the engagement of Francisco Partners and how you ended up with them, whatever you can share, and that whole deal and what they meant to the organization that helped lead into the exit.
Sure. So I guess I should say it was fairly early when I joined the company that it became super clear that this could be a very, very, very substantial company.
Did you use the word?
Yeah, I hate to admit it, but yeah, I thought that this could be a multi-billion-dollar company. We never really wanted to build a company to get to a financial outcome. We just wanted to build a great company and that had a mission and great people, and we were committed to the people because we knew that if we did that, the dollars would come. You didn't need to focus on what's my exit path. You always think about that, but you didn't really have to focus on the exit path. So we knew that this was a tremendous opportunity. We knew we had customer concentration. We had massive channel concentration in certain areas. And when that happens and they see you successful, you're a target. So we had, there were a lot of challenging times, some of which I can't go into. But in order to be successful, we needed to diversify. So we invested hard in, getting the outside of that, while not diluting our focus. Like one of the smartest things that Alan Scanlon ever did, all the way along really, was make sure that we were always incredibly focused. Unlike Plantsoft, where I tried to create this gargantuan, massive solution, we always had to fight he fought to keep us laser focused on one problem as long as that problem had tremendous opportunity. But anyway, so we're building out the company, and in order to get into a fist fight, you better be ready. So early on, I raised a venture debt round, and didn't need the money necessarily, but I wanted to get into a fight. So we banked that, or had that availability there, and we got into a fist fight. And but it could have gone pretty negative, and I might have needed that money to get through it.
So you had a war chest in the unlikely event of the battle getting bad.
Right. So make sure you've got some ammunition if you need to get into that fight. So that was step one. So we architected this very carefully. We wanted to have a really scalable organization. Alan Scantlin allowed us to, and Matt and Sam, we really invested hard in our systems. So the business today has 5 people in accounting because everything is so completely automated from the time we do an intake in the CRM all the way to our business intelligence. It's just all there. But anyway, so scalability is very important, and that we knew what our profit model was. We never really were unprofitable, but we were investing super hard in growth. We weren't trying to be profitable necessarily, just to make sure that we were break even. But because we believed that this was a company that I could IPO, and we committed to that path. To be honest, we wanted to do a little bit of a recap, make sure everybody's comfortable with that, because you're going to be locked up for a while and maybe for a long time. And so we did a recap, plus we wanted to put some money in the bank, plus we wanted to get the experience or the people at the table that could help us understand what it really means to be IPO ready. So we started that process to go out there and talk to the venture and private equity firms at that point. And we're fortunate enough to, we had a whole process like everybody does. We had a banker that was involved, did a phenomenal job. And ironically, you and I have talked about this before. We go, you do the process and you talk to God knows how many private equity firms, and then you winnow it down. People give you their initial thoughts on valuation. You try to get down to maybe 4 or 5. And when we got to the 4 or 5 point, we had 4 that were pretty clustered, in terms of valuation. And we had one, Francisco Partners, that was probably 15, 20% below that cluster. And I'm like, well, they're out. I love them, but they're out. And our banker said, no, you don't understand. These guys are different. They will never retrade a deal. And if they start doing heavy diligence and they find out that what you have is real, they'll up their valuation. So, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this, but I did. And it was the best decision, one of the best decisions I made financing wise.
I remember talking to you and others, they gave no meaning to the term heavy diligence.
Oh my God. We had, yes. So just to put it into perspective, we one of the systems that we built was a because it's so transaction based, a little bit like the payment processing world, where a transaction comes through and we may make money from various sources on the same transaction, and depending upon the pharmacy, the channel, the systems that are on, we may have multiple parties that get a small slice of that revenue. So imagine trying to track that. That's a nightmare. Well, we're a software company, so we built a system to do that. We then morphed the system to do forecasting. So at the time that Francisco, and this was, God, when did we do that deal? I guess it was 2016, no, even before that. I think it was 2015, early 2015. Anyway, at that point, we would crunch, because we would do rolling forecasts every month, and we would crunch 20 million rows of data for a fairly small company to help us understand and look into the future. And not that we expected it to be entirely right, but if we would identify, because we never really hit exactly the way we thought we would, but it was incredibly informative of what's happening in our market and what's happening with our business, and then we could adapt. So we always hit our numbers, just that beneath the covers, it was always a little bit different. They hired a software development firm to, from the ground up, from scratch, rebuild that model, because they wanted to run it with the same data set and make sure that it comes out and matches the data that we were presenting. So the diligence.
I guess it matched.
It did match, thank God. But it was insane, the level of
So the
diligence.
intangible parts of the partnership,
some of the smartest and best people I've ever worked with.
They stayed, if you could talk about, did they ever reconsider their valuation once they got to know you?
Well, they did actually increase their valuation, and it was the best valuation out of the 5, ironically. Because they came in and they saw and they believed. I mean, a lot of times people didn't believe it, and we needed to prove and provide that predictability and the visibility into the business.
It's pretty incredible honesty and transparency for them to take that approach.
Well, and what these guys did in terms of the value that they delivered, and just the integrity, they're world class.
And I assume you're referring to when you came to, now the last part of the financial chapter was you got a Fortune 5 company buying you, and I think they know a thing or two about that. So what was that like?
Well, one of my favorite things to point out is that, so we were, from the time that McKesson said they wanted to buy us, because we were not for sale, and they pressed the point. Because we were prepping the IPO. I had the PwC IPO readiness team literally coming in a week after the CEO of McKesson visited, because we were just at that stage now trying to get our, basically from an accounting and finance perspective, make sure we had everything locked down. But between the time that meeting happened and the time they acquired us, we had doubled the size of the company again. So that process was fairly intense. We had internally 4 or 5 people on our diligence team, plus our accountants and our lawyers and all that kind of stuff. So let's say we had a dozen people. Anybody want to guess how many there were on the McKesson side? At its peak, it was 140 people doing diligence. Oh my God. We literally had, there was a person whose one and only role was to take a look at our credit policies and losses over time. I mean, it was extraordinary. So one of those challenges, honestly, in dealing with
get done, they should probably still look at it.
It was extraordinary. And you know what? The good news is because we always wanted to be IPO ready. Like I never operate without having a data room. Like even when I'm not raising money, I got a data room with everything that I need in case I need to raise money or in case something happens. But that process was so intense. The challenge is that your people are going to burn out. Like there were months at a time where I'd never had a day off. I'm not talking like a work day off. I'm talking a day off. And Stacy's cooking food for our entire team. Finance team. It was interesting and helpful actually that our finance team was based in Cleveland in much smaller office, because we were able to shelter everybody else because everybody knew that this was going on. But we were there all the time. But it was a hell of a process. And then there's challenges in the diligence process. And because they approached us to talk about an acquisition, and we said look, I mean, we can have the conversation. But you understand if we go public, this is the valuation, and that was for them. They're like, what, and so it was very, it was a challenging time. And one last thing on that point is the other thing that we wanted to make sure, and it was incredibly important to Sam, Matt, and Alan, and the rest of us, is that if we did this transaction, everybody would benefit. Our employees would benefit, our customers would benefit, our partners would benefit, and we would have walked from the deal if that didn't happen. Like maintaining that culture, maintaining that commitment to the team.
I guess I should see if anybody has any questions. I'm not sure how we're doing on time here. Anybody?
Oh, there's a lot of great organizations that help businesses here, like JumpStart.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other organizations, we mentioned my name, but they have a mindset of fail fast, fail often. And I was just wondering, what do you think about that whole concept?
Yeah, I guess maybe I'd phrase it a little differently. I would adapt fast. Just statistically, there's going to be a lot of failures. That's why I don't personally love doing one-off angel investing. I'd much rather be part of a fund to do angel investing, because statistically, 10% are going to be your rock stars, if that. And then half of them are going to go out of business. So it's hard to predict, but I would say let's iterate very, very, very quickly. And the challenge is, and where I kind of sometimes don't love the concept of fail fast, the most difficult point in these startups is deciding when have I tried everything and when am I done, right? Because am I failing because of, there's a variety of factors that might, why you're not being successful. Sometimes you just need to push a little harder or change something to get over the hump, to get to success. So, I understand the concept of, fail fast, that I get it. I just think that the best people, the best entrepreneurs are able to navigate and really understand at what point do I bag it and move on.
At any likelihood, CoverMyMeds would become CoverMySurgery, CoverMyLabs, CoverMyRadiology Imaging?
Well, that's a really good question. So back to my point about Alan and how he was just constantly so focused. In the early days, I pushed for that. I actually wanted to change the name of the company because I felt like it was too narrow. And I was worried what was going to happen if we didn't go a little bit more broad in our approach. But Alan was right, and he would keep us so focused on the prescription opportunity. It was also difficult to find the network dynamics that work outside of the medication space. Who's going to pay, right? Can you make this a universal solution? So the same solution you can use for everything. There were always some conflicts, and as long as we were growing 50 to 100% a year and maintaining that profit model, we just never got there. Will they get there? That's a good question. All I know is that if you look at the sector, the things in the prescription management space, it's huge. And now they're part of it's called McKesson Prescription Technology Solutions, MRXTS. Yeah, hell of a name. But it's a collection of assets now that are remarkable. And one of the things that I did after they'd made the acquisition, I thought, and maybe a little bit was hoping they'd say, hey, thanks for that, see you later. Appreciate your contribution to building the company. But instead they asked if I would help with the overall technology portfolio, that collection of companies. And it's a pretty special collection of assets that are all, for the most part, focused on the prescription side. So it could get there eventually, because a lot of the attributes are the same technically and network-based. It's just a matter of time and effort and focus.
So we have time for one more question. Well, actually, now I see two hands, so maybe go quick.
So Ted, could you comment on the change in culture post-sale during a 3-year period of incentives?
Of course. So I mentioned how important certain things were in the transaction. Clearly, we had at the today, I don't know what CoverMyMeds is at, but it's well over 1,000 people. Back when we did the deal, maybe it was 400 or 500 people. But that's a lot of people that had committed their livelihoods, their career, their time, their passion to a company with a mission. So when we went through the process of negotiating with McKesson, we were very, very, very adamant about maintaining the culture, maintaining the commitment to our employees. You're not taking the beer out of the company, because literally we've got beer and wine and mixed drink, whatever you want. Get CoverMyMeds, you can have it all. I know it's whatever, but it's important, right? Those things matter, and in some ways, everybody chuckles about the beer, but I actually have a theory that it's not about the beer, it's about the trust. It's the fact that we trust our employees to be adults and professionals, even if there's beer in the fridge, right? So anyway, maintaining that culture was very important. And I gotta say, McKesson it's a big company, that has a way, right? They grow through acquisition, and they've got a template. They stamp these suckers out, and if you don't fit in that template in the past, you were modified. They committed to completely change their style and approach, and have been, I would think, in terms of partners, pretty remarkable. So they've maintained that. They've maintained the commitment to our employees, and they've provided and helped this business grow. Even we grew faster the second year after acquisition than we did the first year after acquisition. It was a distraction, a little bit of a distraction for some of us, but it's also because McKesson brought resources to bear to help the company be successful. It improved our channel power, right? I mean, if it's one thing if it's CoverMyMeds, even if we're great and growing and with the size that we were, a little different when you've got a multi-billion-dollar company with you. So it really helped, and we've been able to, have been able to maintain, I mean, not that it hasn't changed, it will change and adapt, but whether we were independent or bought, culture would adapt.
Last question, then we'll wrap up.
Ted, could you share some insight on what made your when you first started out, how you identified the business opportunity, or what you were going to focus on? What techniques did you use? Brainstorming, et cetera, et cetera. Could you share some insight on how you guys?
Yeah, I actually have a process that I've developed over the years in how we think about markets and opportunities and go-to-market strategies and profit models. So I guess in a way, you start, like, not rocket science necessarily, but we start by thinking about markets. I'm not great at a lot of things, but one thing I am good at, I think, is pattern recognition and seeing how systems work and the interplay among the different participants in complex markets. And so we would spend a lot of time thinking about those markets and the motivations and the drivers of the participants. And I'll try to make this quick. The hook is, I see it coming. But
It's all available on marketcypher.com.
yeah, right. I thought about that, but no, it's not there. I don't even have a website yet. But really carefully thinking about that market. I mean, I would go into these businesses, these other McKesson businesses, and we would go through the planning process. And I'd say, well, okay, so what's your initial thought on the market? You know where they would go immediately? They would say, I'm going to grow the business 8% this year. Like, why? Well, we grew 8% last year. Oh, that's great. Help me understand, though, the market. How big is the market? Who's out there competing for the market share? How quickly is that market growing? Because if the market's growing 20 and you're telling me 8, you suck and you're fired, right? No, that's not how we do it. We're gonna really understand the market participants. We're gonna figure out the value proposition, and then we're gonna put together an aggressive plan. And then, frankly, it's what do you need to achieve this goal?
That'd be the,
Anyway.
that would be the less velvet hammer.
Well, yeah, the less velvet. I wouldn't maybe say it quite so directly, but yeah, a little bit of velvet around it. But that's what we would do. We would always focus on the profit model. We would always look at the things like cost of customer acquisition break even to make sure that we've got an efficient customer acquisition model. And those things mattered. And as long as we always felt as long as we were bringing people along, we could actually get them to buy in, because it goes back to that point of if I'm increasing their quota and they feel like the market's shrinking, the opportunity's shrinking, or maybe I'm breaking territories apart, because no salesperson in their right mind wants to give up territory, even if the market's growing. Unless they understand what the what's and the whys, they're going to revolt and not be as successful.
Okay, I had one thought as I was listening to this, many thoughts, but one thought in particular. And that is I sort of give up, because David and I started these shows 4 years ago, and Cheryl Strom was back here, she just left a minute ago, but when she spoke, we had 100 people sign up. This time we had 160. I don't know that we'll get more sign-ups, more live bodies, or a better show than this. And Jerry, as the first person entrusted with the microphone other than the speaker, person getting interrogated, did grand. So let's have a round of applause for these two. and they'll stay around for a few minutes for questions. Now, if you thought the networking was good with Cleveland's business leaders, come to our event at Chuck's on the 17th, and we've got a program planned for March 15th on selling your business. John Lane's going to be trusted with the microphone, so I'm going out on a limb again.
March 20th.
March 20th, pardon me. And then in May, we heard reference earlier to Explorus, and we'll have Charlie from Explorus speaking in May. So come back often, come up with your questions, and thank you for coming today.
That was great.